What's going on, guys? JHoyt back with you today. Welcome back to some Call of Duty Modern Warfare. We got more of our CDL playlist in the background, so I hope you guys do enjoy that as always. But if you guys didn't see it, the last video we posted was a Call of Duty, the CDL Dallas preview. Well, it's Monday, right? It's time for the recap as we have a brand new champion, a brand new winner of the CDL. Not totally, just for the Dallas homestand. So let's just say it started off pretty straightforward. Then it gets a little bit spicy later on. So our first matchup featured the Florida Mutineers and the Toronto Ultra. Pharaoh actually staying in the lineup, actually was frying pretty much the entire weekend, so he might have solidified his spot in the starting lineup. Maybe they go with Pristini back in the lineup, or if we get a little bit later on, you'll understand maybe why not. But this goes to a game 5. And this is kind of surprising because usually I'd predict Toronto not to have a chance in the series, right? Florida, such a strong team, but just haven't really gotten it done, you know, when it comes to those, you know, top tier teams, those top half of the table teams. And this one goes game 5. Toronto somehow pulls it out, and they have overall been performing, you know, so it's really questionable, but they beat a really solid team in the Florida Mutineers. So this one, very surprising, but Toronto moves on to face off against the winner of the hometown team, the Dallas Empire versus the Los Angeles Guerrillas. And this one went pretty straightforward. I probably would have predicted this one to be a 3-0, but somehow LA gets one on the board. Dallas wins it though in a game 4 fashion, moving them on to face off against Toronto. But jumping down to Group B, this one went exactly how we predicted it, right? The first matchup, Seattle versus Paris. Paris, you know, although I would have probably predicted these guys to win it maybe in a game 3, game 4, this one actually goes distance, game 5 fashion. You know, I did hear that there was some connection issues on the side of Seattle, but they still managed to take it to a game 5, but Paris wins this one, moving them on to face off against the winner of the Chicago Huntsman versus the Minnesota Roker. And this one, I mean, what do I even say about this one? Straightforward, 3-0. And, you know, although it was really close, it was like there was no real blowouts. You know, it was very interesting nonetheless. But Chicago ends up moving on to face off against Paris, which was really interesting because Chicago, I almost said Optic. Chicago down in the S&D 05. They come back and win that one. I believe this was the matchup was versus Minnesota. Maybe it was the next matchup versus Paris. I don't really remember, but Chicago and Paris move on to the next round. But jumping back up to the top side of the bracket, we have the qualifiers for the semifinals. We have Toronto versus the Dallas Empire. And this one, Toronto can't keep their hot streak. They go down, but it does go game 5 versus one of the best teams here. Their run stops right here for now as they drop down to the bottom side of the bracket. But Dallas comes away huge, game 5 fashion. They move on to the semifinals. In Group B, though, this one again went straight forward, where the Paris Legion and the Chicago Huntsmen, Chicago wins this one 3-1. You know, this was a good series, don't get me wrong, but just the Chicago Huntsmen came out, showed their class, showed they'll be able to switch some things up, and they came out on top in that game 4. But before we move on, we gotta catch up on the loser's side of the bracket, or the knockout match, I guess they call it. So the Florida Mutineers and the LA Guerrillas up in Group A. The Florida Mutineers get some revenge and take one match here. Game 4. Not really surprised about that one. You know, if I would have predicted those two, you know, teams in that final, or in that matchup, I definitely would have predicted Florida. No question about it. But again, LA does get another map on the board. So I don't know exactly what map it is. Maybe it's search, maybe it's domination. you know, but Florida's such a good respawn team that I just don't see them doing it. So maybe it's a search, but LA kind of setting up for the future rather than setting up to win now. So that'll be another video later on. But Florida moves on to the loser of that Dallas and Toronto series, which was the Toronto Ultra, where Florida wins once again in a Game 4 fashion, moving them on to the semifinals from Group A. So we got Dallas, we got Florida. Although I didn't really see it in this kind of way, they both move on. But jumping down to Group B, we got to catch up on the losers bracket down there as well. The Minnesota Roker go against the Seattle Surge. This one goes the distance. Game 5. Minnesota takes this one. Seattle still struggling. They only win, what, 2? I guess they win 4 maps this entire series, but still, they're just they're not performing. Don't know what it's going to take to help them out. Once again, will be featured in an upcoming video, but just still nothing working on the side of Seattle. But the Minnesota Roker still showing that they're a top team, moving on to knockout match number 2 with the loser of Chicago and Paris being Paris, and Minnesota wins this one. So we have our 4 teams, right? We have Dallas, Minnesota, Chicago, and Florida. Oh boy, it's getting spicy. Probably, I'd say undeniably, the top 4 teams at this event made it to the Final 4. So the seeds did reshuffle and everything. So the winner of Group A faces off against the loser of Group B. And then the winner of Group B faces off against the loser of Group A. So a little bit confusing, but if you're looking at the bracket right now, you'll understand what's going on. But this one, the first matchup, featured our hometown team once again, the Dallas Empire versus the Minnesota Roker. And this one, kind of really surprising. Don't know what went wrong for Dallas in this one, but Minnesota come out kind of with a big upset versus Dallas. Game 4, Minnesota wins this one to push them on to the grand finals versus who knows yet. But Minnesota Roker automatically made that series be there was going to be a new champion if Chicago lost. But we had the rematch. Chicago versus Florida. I'd say it's a battle of the brothers, but Brissini still on the bench for Florida. This one, I mean, Chicago came out really sloppy in this one, and I don't know if they just, it's Florida or what, but the last time the Chicago faced Florida, reverse swept. Florida wins that one, and it was really surprising. But this time, it wasn't a reverse sweep. This one only went to Game 4, but Florida comes out and wins this one. Skies and who was it? Farrell, I believe, were frying pretty much all weekend long. That puts on 2 brand new teams to the grand final with a guarantee that there is going to be a new winner, a new champion of the CDL League this year. We had the Florida Mutineers facing off against the Minnesota Roker. Florida trying to get their first ever win after being in the grand finals with the Atlanta FaZe. You know, I think that was back in Atlanta. But this one was a doozy. It was a good one, of course. But congratulations to your finals winners, the Florida Mutineers. They were frying all weekend long. Pharaoh, Skies were the kind of the main 2 holding down their team. Like I said, they were just frying. Pharaoh, I mean, I hate to, you know, put so much pressure on a new guy into their roster, but he came out and performed really, really well. So, not that I don't think Pristini is a good player, but Pharaoh might have just solidified his spot in this team. And that, you know, would, I guess, beg the question, is Pristini part of Florida's future, where they might end up trading him or, you know, obviously sending him to a different team? You know, we'll have to find out. But it was a good, you know, good event overall. I didn't see too many issues overall. I mean, like I said, Karma tweeted out a little bit of internet issues in their matchup, I think in the first round versus Paris. But the other thing I wanted to mention is the commentary and the production side of things. I know it was their first event online, but for being their first event online, it went kind of bad. I'm going to be honest. Like, it was not a good broadcast to watch, where, you know, there was a lot of lag. There was a lot of, you know, levels, issues as far as audio, you know, people talking before they should be. Then they had like dual observers, which was weird because one person would be commentating one thing and they're showing a different thing. You know, team comms were weird. You know, all of that stuff was just weird, and I don't know what it was, but hopefully they'll fix it for next event. They'll get back all the feedback, they'll rewatch some of the broadcasts, and hopefully they'll fix it for, I believe Chicago is actually the next event, so I'm actually super excited about that one. But anyway, guys, I'm going to wrap this one up here. If you did enjoy, hit that like button down below. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, and as always, guys, we'll see you next time.